She stood still, surrounded by silence. The axe gleamed under torchlight, its edge a promise of finality. And yet she did not run. Draped in crimson velvet, Mary faced the executioner's block as if it were a throne. This was no mere death, it was the closing curtain of a tragedy. The queen who once ruled hearts and nations now knelt as a prisoner, condemned by her cousin Elizabeth of England. The blade would fall, but the deeper wound had been struck long before in shadowed halls where trust turned into treachery. This was a reckoning shaped by betrayal and power. February 8, 1587. Fotheringhay Castle stood damp, glistening with English winter. A small crowd gathered, nobles, witnesses, silent men, burdened with history. Mary entered, steps measured, head unbowed. At 44, her beauty faded, but her presence remained radiant. Her crimson gown defied death, declaring she'd die a queen, not a traitor. The executioner trembled. "Forgive me," he whispered. Mary answered with grace, her voice steady as she knelt and laid her neck across the block. Her lips moved in prayer. The first swing missed, bone cracked. A gasp rose. The second blow ended her life. Blood spilled, and with it, an era. But how had it come to this? How did a queen born to reign kneel before a blade? What drove Elizabeth, her cousin, her mirror in power, to sign her death? Mary's end wasn't just execution. It was the unraveling of a tapestry woven with ambition, faith, and betrayal across kingdoms. To understand her fall, we must return to Scotland's wild hills, to where her life began, far from England's courts. Mary was born in December 1542 in Linlithgow Palace. Her father, King James of Enriff, lay dying as she drew her first breath. A crown rested on an infant's fragile head. Scotland was fractured, torn by clan wars and schemes. Mary's mother, Mary of Guise, a French noblewoman, shielded her fiercely. She knew England's eyes were watching, a Catholic queen in a Protestant storm. Mary wasn't merely a ruler, she was a prize. At 6, she was sent to France, already a symbol. In France, she thrived. Betrothed to Francis the Dauphin, she grew elegant, brilliant, beloved. She mastered languages, music, diplomacy. Her auburn hair shimmered, her charm beguiled nobles and poets. But her grace hid danger, a claim to England's throne. As Henry VII's granddaughter, she was Elizabeth's Catholic rival in blood. When Francis became king in 1559, Mary stood atop the world. Queen of Scotland, Queen of France, and in Catholic eyes, heir to England. But fate turned cruel. Francis died in 1560. Widowed at 18, she left France behind. Her heart remained, but Scotland called a torn land she barely knew. In 1561, Mary returned to Scotland. The mist clung to her as she stepped ashore, elegant in French gowns, radiant but out of place. Scotland wasn't Versailles. It was iron and fire. Preachers thundered against her Catholicism. Nobles sharpened daggers behind smiles. Yet Mary met them with charm and steel. Mary ruled carefully, balancing belief and politics. She tolerated Protestant reforms publicly, but held Catholic Mass in private. She danced with lords, debated with scholars, seeking unity. But loyalty in Scotland shifted like wind. To secure her crown, she needed a husband, one who could anchor her in unstable waters. She chose Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, a cousin with royal blood, handsome and promising. Their 1565 marriage began with hope, but quickly soured. Darnley was arrogant, drunk, and power-hungry. Their union birthed mistrust, not strength. In 1566, their son James was born, joyful, yet overshadowed by crumbling trust and jealousy. Darnley's envy grew toxic. He alienated allies, plotted in shadows. Then in 1567, his Edinburgh house exploded. His body was found strangled in a garden. Fingers pointed to Mary and her ally, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. Soon after she married Bothwell. Was it love, coercion, or a desperate calculation? The nobles revolted. Was Mary complicit in Darnley's murder? Or had Bothwell seized her truth, drowned in rumors? Her crown slipped. She was imprisoned and forced to abdicate for infant James. In 1568, she escaped south to England, to Elizabeth, to her cousin, to the last hope she believed in. Mary's arrival ignited fear. Elizabeth ruled a divided land, Protestant yet fragile. Mary wasn't just a fugitive, she was a Catholic queen with a claim to Elizabeth's throne. Shelter her and invite rebellion. Reject her and anger Europe. Elizabeth chose the middle, a prison gilded in courtesy, bound by suspicion. For 19 years, Mary waited. Her castles changed, Tutbury, Sheffield, Chartley, but the bars remain. Her letters were intercepted. Her visitors watched. She embroidered, prayed, and wrote each word a thread stretching beyond stone walls. To Catholics, she was a saint in chains. To Protestants, a spark near dry kindling. Plots bloomed around her, the Ridolfi plot in 1571, the Throckmorton plot in 1583. All aimed to crown Mary dethrone, Elizabeth raise Catholic banners. Mary denied involvement, but her name drew conspirators like moths. Even her prayers were suspect. Her solitude became political, her faith a danger, her silence suspicious. Then came the Babington Plot 1586, a plan to kill Elizabeth and place Mary on England's throne. Messages hidden in beer barrels reached her. Isolated, desperate, Mary responded. Yes, her letter sealed her fate. But it had been a trap. Francis Walsingham had orchestrated everything. The web closed. Confessions followed. Mary was arrested. Her words, hopeful, incriminating, became weapons. She was tried not as a queen, but a criminal. In October 1586, she faced her accusers. Regal defiant, she declared, "I am no subject to be tried." But divine rights mattered little when fear ruled. She was sentenced to die. Elizabeth hesitated. For months she delayed signing the warrant. Kinship warred with politics. To kill a fellow queen, a cousin, was unthinkable. But Mary's presence endangered England. Her name stirred rebellion. In the end, survival won. Elizabeth signed, quietly, grimly, and the shadow of that signature would haunt her forever. Mary received the sentence with calm. She had expected it. The storm had long gathered, this was only its breaking. The night before her death, she wrote letters to kin, and kings gifted her belongings to servants and chose her final gown, crimson, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She would die proud. February 8, 1587. Cold seeped through Fotheringhay Castle. Mary rose early, bathed and prayed. Her voice, soft yet resolute, calmed her grieving maids. She gave away her rings, books, and final tokens. Though robbed of crown and country, she would meet death not as a traitor, but as a sovereign soul. At 8 o'clock, she entered the hall. Crimson silk trailed behind her like spilled blood. Nobles fell silent. Officials stood still. The executioner muttered an apology. Mary forgave him. She knelt, arranged her skirts, and placed her neck upon the block. Her lips whispered Latin prayers as the axe rose. The first blow missed, struck her shoulder. A groan swept the crowd. The second ended her life. Her head fell. Blood soaked the floor. A small terrier hidden beneath her gown emerged and whimpered, refusing to leave her body. The illusion of youth, her wig fell away, revealing gray hair beneath. The executioners burned her clothes, scrubbed the blood, tried to erase what had happened. But Mary's death would not be forgotten. Her final act was not submission, but defiance. She turned a scaffold into a stage, and a traitor's death into the triumph of a queen who embraced eternity. The news raced across Europe. Catholic nations mourned. Cathedrals held masses. Her face appeared on devotional altars, Mary the martyred queen. To England's enemies, she became more powerful dead than alive. Spain's fury flared. Philip II saw her execution as an attack on Catholicism, and vengeance stirred in every sail. That same year, the Spanish Armada launched. Storms, flames, and English ships scattered it, but the message was clear: Mary's blood fueled war. Back in England, Elizabeth wept. She claimed she hadn't meant the warrant to be carried out. Whether guilt or strategy, the stain of Mary marked her reign. And then fate's irony struck. In 1603, Elizabeth died childless. The crown passed to Mary's son, James VI of Scotland, now James I of England. The son of the executed queen now ruled the land that had condemned her. Two thrones united. The blood once spilled now linked crowns forever. Mary had lost her life, but gained a legacy. James reigned, uniting kingdoms, forging a new age. His mother's execution, meant to extinguish her line, had instead paved the way for a dynasty. The woman buried far from her homeland had won something more enduring than thrones history's reluctant reverence. Mary's story echoed long after. Poets turned her sorrows into verse. Painters captured her defiance in oil and shadow. Historians debated her every move. Was she naive or bold, victim or schemer? But all agreed her death reshaped empires. her name whispered through corridors of power, too enduring to be silenced. Mary's letters survived, smuggled past guards and suspicion. They spoke of longing betrayal and unyielding faith. One letter ended, "Adieu. Remember your sister who died for her faith." Her handwriting trembled, yet her voice remained steady. Even in chains, she wrote like a queen, her ink carrying the weight of legacy. Elizabeth, the survivor, ruled on for 16 more years. She saw revolts, victories, and the slow erosion of her own strength. She never married, never named a clear heir, and perhaps never forgave herself. When alone, some said she whispered Mary's name toward the north, as if begging silent absolution. England changed, but questions lingered. What does it mean to wear a crown that cuts as deeply as it shines? What is power when bought with betrayal, blood, and isolation? Mary didn't leave answers. She left a mirror reflecting ambition, fear, sacrifice. And in that mirror, the world continues to search. Fotheringay's stone floors were scrubbed clean, but echoes lingered. The torchlight that once flickered over blood now dances over ghosts. Her voice, once silenced by an axe, became louder in legend. Not as a ruler of lands, but of memory, of myth, of warnings, etched in red across royal history. Mary's legacy wasn't perfection. She was flawed, impulsive, trusting in untrustworthy hands, tangled in dangerous passions. Darnley Bothwell, the letters, her choices shaped her downfall. But she was also betrayed by friends, family, fate. Her story is not of a saint nor a villain, but of a queen devoured by the game. She was born into chaos, raised in courts of illusion, and died in isolation. But she remained unbroken. In death, she claimed a strange kind of victory, one not of crown or conquest, but of dignity. Her final gaze unflinching, her final word a prayer, her legacy immortal in contradiction. Elizabeth may have won the throne, but Mary won time. Centuries softened judgments. The woman condemned became a symbol mourned. Her portraits still hang, her eyes locked on ours across generations. They ask, would you have chosen differently? Could you survive a world built to see you fall? And what of her son James, raised far from her arms, taught to fear her legacy, yet carried her blood? He ruled England with caution, perhaps haunted by what his crown had cost. When he died, the Stuart line faltered, but Mary's name endured. Not through heirs, but through unyielding memory. Two queens, one Protestant, one Catholic, one who ruled to the end, one who lost everything. And yet they remain forever entwined. Elizabeth rests in Westminster Abbey. Years later, James moved Mary's body there too, buried feet apart. In death, the queens who never reconciled were forced into royal proximity. History forgets many monarchs, but not Mary. Not the queen who knelt before a blade with crimson pride. Not the woman whose life was a battlefield of faith, power, and betrayal. Her story endures not because it ended well, but because it ended meaningfully. Because even in defeat, she mattered. She was Scotland's daughter, France's queen, and England's prisoner. Each land shaped her, each throne wounded her, yet none erased her. She walked through palaces and prisons with the same spine. Even stripped of power, Mary carried herself as royalty. She lost crowns, but never her bearing or her defiant grace. In Chartley, Sheffield, Tutbury, her steps echoed through cold halls. Her auburn hair silvered, her body weakened, but her will endured. Walsingham's spies lurked, reading her letters, studying her servants. Still, she embroidered her emblems, wrote to kings, and prayed. Her cage had iron bars, but her mind remained untamed. The Babington letters were the last thread. She wrote in desperation, her hope wrapped in parchment and ink. She believed rescue was possible, that justice might arrive. But justice had long left the room. The moment she penned those lines, the door to Fotheringay began to close behind her. The trial was a performance. She was not judged, she was condemned. She stood alone without counsel before men who had already signed her fate. I am a sovereign queen, she said, but sovereignty meant nothing to fear. To England, she was not a guest. She was a risk to eliminate. When the verdict was announced, Mary did not weep. Her eyes held fury, sorrow, and peace. The sentence was death, but it had lived in her shadow for years. She met it not with shock, but with readiness. The War of Thrones had finally chosen its price, and she would pay. Her execution was designed to be clinical, cold, and contained. But no blade can be clean when it silences a queen. The first stroke failed, the second succeeded. And as her blood spread, even her enemies stood still. Her dog whined. Her head rolled. The silence that followed was not peace. Witnesses wrote in shivers. One described the room as cut from breath. Another said the air would not clear for days. The axe had fallen, but the weight remained. Fathering Hay had consumed a queen, and in doing so gave birth to a legend. The ghost of Mary would not rest. Her terrier was found curled beneath her skirts, refusing to leave her side. No one dared move it at first. That little dog, trembling and bloodied, became the last symbol of her humanity. Even queens die, but even in death loyalty clings. Love stays behind to howl in the dark. The officials scrubbed the hall, burned the linens, destroyed her garments. But memory is not made of cloth. They couldn't burn the image of crimson silk and silver hair. They couldn't silence the whisper that history would hear louder than any trial. Here died a queen, not a threat. In Europe, bells tolled. Paintings emerged. Mary was crowned anew in martyrdom. In England, Elizabeth hid her grief. I did not wish it, she repeated, but none believed her. The pen that signed the death warrant was her own. And once signed, no monarch, no matter how reluctant, can unspill blood. Elizabeth's court grew uneasy. Silence replaced celebration. Advisors shuffled, eyes downcast. Some whispered that Elizabeth stayed awake for days staring into candlelight. Perhaps it was guilt, perhaps fear. For in killing Mary, she had killed the one person who understood her burden, another queen bound by thrones and threatened by men. The political cost was immense. Spain, outraged by Mary's death, prepared for war. Philip II's ships darkened the sea with vengeance. The Spanish Armada set sail, a holy mission, wrapped in banners and cannon fire. Elizabeth rallied England, but in every wave, Mary's ghost rode with the winds of consequence. The Armada failed. Storms scattered ships. English fire destroyed fleets. But the shadow remained. Mary had not lived to see it, but her death had caused it. The war was born of blood spilled on a castle floor. Her body was buried, but her name now marched with armies and sailors. And then came the irony, bitter royal precise. In 1603, Elizabeth died alone and without an heir. The crown passed to Mary's son. James VI of Scotland became James I of England. The same child torn from her arms now ruled the kingdom that once held her captive and cut her down. James brought peace. He ended Catholic persecutions. He commissioned the King James Bible. He tried to forget the scaffold that claimed his mother, but the world did not forget. The ink from his reign was drawn from a well filled by Mary's sacrifice. His throne was cushioned by her blood. When he grew older, James ordered her remains moved. Mary was reburied in Westminster Abbey beneath soaring arches beside kings. She now rested only feet from Elizabeth, the woman who signed her death. Two queens, once divided by faith and steel, now shared the silence of marble and dust. Tourists pass their tombs today, unaware of the storms beneath. Two monarchs locked in rivalry rest side by side. One died in power, one died by blade. But in death they are equal. Time forgets victory. It remembers the courage it took to kneel, to speak, to forgive before the axe. Mary's portraits remain. Her eyes watch still. In galleries and halls, her face follows visitors. The red gown, the rosary, the crown, each brushstroke preserves more than beauty. They preserve defiance. These paintings are not decoration. They are resistance, silent screams stretched across canvas, reminding us who she truly was. Her letters, fragile and stained, are stored in archives now. Each one a thread from her cell to our time. She spoke of loneliness, of betrayal, of hope. She signed as a queen. Even when confined, she claimed her title. And in doing so, she claimed something even monarchs rarely hold: legacy. What does it mean to rule? Is it crowns and titles, or the grace with which one meets ruin? Mary's life asked that question. Her death answered it. She did not rule lands in the end, but she ruled memory. And memory, when stirred by injustice, is the sharpest blade of all. Mary's story lives in stage and song. Shakespeare never wrote of her, but countless others did. In poems and plays, she walks again, sometimes angelic, sometimes doomed. Her tragedy became theater, her pain a script. And in each retelling, the audience decides, was she victim, fool, queen, or all three? Some called her reckless, a heart led by passion. Others called her noble, a spirit broken only by betrayal. Perhaps both were true, for Mary did not live in halves. She loved deeply, ruled boldly, and fell completely. Her fall was not soft, it was thunder. And thunder echoes long after the storm. She lived in a world that punished powerful women. Too gentle and you were weak, too firm and you were dangerous. Mary walked this blade-thin line, so did Elizabeth. But where Elizabeth bent and endured, Mary clashed and cracked. One survived by silence, the other died by speaking. Both women were alone, surrounded by courtiers, suitors, soldiers, but alone. One ruled from golden halls, one from damp chambers. Their letters were measured, their smiles practiced. They were queens, but also women denied comfort, companionship, and rest. Power fed them, but never held them, and history devoured them both. In death, Mary became larger than life. Catholics called her a martyr, Protestants a warning, feminists a forerunner, royals a cautionary tale. She wore many crowns and after death, many masks. But the truth remains, she was a human being asking to be seen, remembered, understood, not just judged. Centuries passed, but her name remained. Historians revised, biographers speculated. But the blood on the axe never faded. It was real, it was warm, it mattered. It turned stone walls into legend, and a woman into a mirror held up to power, where truth, politics, and mercy often war. Some say she should have stayed in France. Others say she never should have trusted Bothwell or written those letters. But such talk ignores the world she lived in, a world that left her few choices. And when choices are traps, even queens bleed. Even queens fall. Even queens are burned away. She prayed aloud before death, calling upon Christ, upon her ancestors, upon justice. The crowd wept. Some could not watch. Others stared, unable to look away. The executioner tried to be swift, but even death stumbled in her presence. For hers was not a simple end. It was spectacle. Her crimson gown soaked the floor. Her hair gray and real beneath the wig fell free. Her terrier bloodstain stood guard, and the silence afterward was thick as velvet. No one moved. No one spoke. The air itself seemed to mourn. History in that moment bent under the weight of consequence. Elizabeth's court tried to move on, but England was never the same. The warrant she signed was not parchment, it was prophecy. It foretold ships' flames and shifts of crown. And in every royal celebration that followed, one truth pulsed beneath, that a queen once knelt and the world watched. In the years after Elizabeth avoided the subject, her advisors did not mention Mary unless required. But at night she was said to pace restless. Some believed she whispered apologies to shadows. Whether regret or ritual, it was clear the execution did not end Mary's hold. It only deepened it. James too was silent. He never spoke publicly of his mother's death. But silence is not forgetting. In his own way, he restored her honor by ruling both England and Scotland. The son of the executed queen now wore the crown once guarded from her. Her bloodline had claimed its place. When James ordered her reburial at Westminster, it was more than ceremonial. It was justice delayed but not denied. Mary was given a tomb fit for queens among marble saints and carved angels. The same land that condemned her now honored her. But honor built on bones is always bittersweet. Her tomb bears no wounds, no marks of how she died, only her name and titles. Yet every visitor senses it, that hush, that weight. For beneath that stone lies a story soaked in betrayal and blood, faith and fire. A woman buried as royalty, but remembered as something greater. Elizabeth lies only feet away. Tour guides speak of their rivalry, but rarely of their sorrow. Two cousins, two queens, two flames who scorched the world around them. One died on her terms, the other by decree. Yet both now share silence and uneasy peace carved in English stone. They say history is written by the victors, but Mary complicates that. She lost her kingdom, her freedom, her life, and yet she is remembered, fiercely, tenderly, with debate and devotion. Her death did not silence her, it amplified her. And now, centuries later, she still speaks through pages, through prayers. Children learn her name, writers summon her image, actors walk in her steps. She has become myth, symbol, ghost. But she was once real, a girl, a bride, a mother. Her story warns and inspires. It reminds us that power does not protect, and that even queens are breakable. In a world of swords and thrones, Mary reached for love, for faith, for peace. And for that, she was caged, judged, beheaded. Her fall was not from weakness, but from daring. Daring to believe she could rule with both heart and crown. And in that belief, she defied her world. What remains, not her gowns, not her jewels, but her words, her prayers, her final gaze. These linger longer than armies. Her death changed the course of nations. But her life, the way she walked toward the axe unflinching, changed the way we understand queenship, womanhood, and the true cost of legacy. Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, prisoner, martyr, legend. Her story is not confined to the past. It ripples still through debates, through art, through whispered tours in ancient halls. She did not live to see redemption, but perhaps in how she is remembered, she has received it. In memory, she reigns. We often forget the sound of resistance is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like a woman kneeling in red, whispering Latin as death approaches. Mary's final act wasn't just defiance, it was grace under fire. The kind of grace that shames blades and outlasts crowns. That kind of silence roars. The English crown tried to erase her, burned her belongings, sealed her letters. But the harder they tried, the louder she became. Martyrs do not disappear. They rise in retellings. Mary became ink, brushstroke, and song. Not because she wanted to, but because the world needed her story to be told. And what of the axe? Cold, steel, unfeeling. It served its master but could not kill legacy. The executioner's blade ended breath, not truth. In that moment, Mary became something monarchs rarely do, immortal in memory. A queen whose fall revealed the system that crushed her and still threatens many today. Mary's faith defined her. Not just her Catholicism, but her belief in destiny and divine justice. That faith brought her comfort in condemnation. It made her a threat to England's order. And yet it was that same belief that steadied her hand, calmed her voice, and guided her head to the block. She died young but lived intensely, loved deeply, failed publicly, forgave freely. She trusted too much, schemed too little, and paid the price. But that too is legacy, not perfection, but humanity. Mary reminds us that a queen's heart beats like ours, full of hope, fear, longing, and quiet courage. There's a strength in vulnerability, in choosing beauty in a brutal world. Mary did that with every letter, every prayer, every deliberate step to the scaffold. She made her death her own, and in doing so robbed her enemies of full victory. They took her life, but not her story. To understand Mary is to confront our own hunger for control, for judgment. She was blamed for being too passionate, too trusting, too proud. But perhaps she was simply too human in a world that demanded queens be machines. Her punishment wasn't for crimes, but for refusing to become cold. The chronicles wrote her fate, but the people rewrote her meaning. In cottages, in chapels, in secret, her name became sacred. To the oppressed, she was hope. To the faithful, a saint. To women, a warning, and to the future, a question: what happens when power fears empathy? Not all royalty wears well, but Mary wore her suffering like velvet, visible, soft, and undeniable. She never hid her pain nor her pride. She died as she lived in full view. And in that fullness, she offered the world a reflection, not of flawless queens, but of fearless ones. History doesn't whisper, it echoes. Through stone, through blood, through silence. Mary's name endures because her fall felt unjust, because her grace felt rare, because her courage felt real. We remember not to idolize, but to understand. The past is not gone. It breathes in every story like Mary's. The floor at Fotheringhay is dry now, the crowd long gone, but the air there still carries something heavy, as if the walls remember, as if the stone recalls her final breath. Time may pass, but tragedy leaves fingerprints, and Mary's final moment pressed deep into the castle's bones. She did not beg, did not tremble. Her prayer was not for herself, but for those she left behind, her servants, her son, even Elizabeth. That final grace, unearned, perhaps undeserved, was the most powerful thing she gave. Mercy in the face of death, nobility in the face of silence. When her head fell, so did the illusion. The world saw not a queen in control, but a woman crushed by power's cruelty. Yet in that collapse, she rose. Mary was no longer just a monarch. She became myth. Myths don't die. They shift, evolve, and haunt the world that made them. Children now walk through Westminster unaware. They pass her tomb point at plaques. But if they listen, they might feel it. That thrum beneath the stone, that pulse of history still alive. Mary doesn't speak anymore. She doesn't have to. The silence around her says enough. Queens are not supposed to bleed, not supposed to cry, not supposed to fail. Mary did all three, and that is why we remember her. Because she was not what she was supposed to be. She was real, and in that reality, she became greater than any title could contain. They tried to erase her, burn her letters, hide her body, silence her story. But she lingered in whispers, portraits, prayers, in the spaces between laws and legends. Mary wasn't buried, she was planted, and from her pain grew remembrance, and from remembrance a reckoning. Not all legacies are golden. Some are crimson, some rusted, some forged in the fire of injustice. Mary's is all of them, a queen who lost everything but left everything behind. Her crown was broken, but her story is whole, and it continues to speak to those willing to hear. She teaches us this, that power is fragile, that justice is not always just, that dignity can survive even the axe, and that the way a person dies matters. It matters more than how they lived, because the end becomes the echo, and Mary's echo still shakes stone. Even now we are drawn to her tragedy, to her strength. We see her in the women's silence today and voices ignored and truth distorted. Mary is not gone. She is the silence after injustice, the whisper in a courtroom, the breath before resistance, the mirror we cannot avoid. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a triumph. This is a warning carved in velvet and bone. Mary, Queen of Scots, reminds us the blade falls fast, but the shadow it casts falls forever. And sometimes in that shadow we find not only grief, but understanding.